This is part 2 of our story. If you haven't watched part 1 yet, go back one video and watch the first part. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like. Miriam held his head in her lap, wetting his forehead with the damp cloth, while murmuring, "Stay awake, please, don't sleep now, Jonas. Breathe. I'm here." With each minute, she felt desperation increase. It was fear, it was affection, it was love. Although she still didn't dare to admit it completely. When they arrived at the house, they placed Jonas in his room. The fever was high and his body sweated cold. Miriam stayed there through the night, alternating with cold compresses, trying to make tea, praying softly while holding his hand. "Please, my God, don't take him. Not now, not like this." At dawn, Jonas was delirious. He called for his mother, sometimes his father, other times he said nothing, just breathed with difficulty, as if each breath were a struggle. Miriam didn't budge. On the second day, the workers began to worry. "Miriam, you need to rest a little," said the foreman. "I'll rest when he gets better." But the fever wouldn't break. On the third day, Jonas woke for a few moments, weak as never before. He looked at Miriam, who was holding his hand tightly. "Miriam. I'm here, Jonas. Don't strain yourself to speak." He closed his eyes, but insisted on continuing. "I thought I was, but you're more. You stayed." The tears rolled down her face, silent. "I would stay 1,000 times if necessary, but you need to fight, you need to listen to me." He squeezed her hand, or at least tried to. "You mean more to me than you can imagine." Miriam, overcome with emotion, rested her forehead on his hand. "Then stay alive. I don't want to lose you." The words escaped. There was no holding back anymore. The early morning fell, bringing with it an exhausted Miriam who continued firm beside him. And as she changed another compress, she thought about how Jonas had been the first man to treat her with dignity. The first who saw her beyond rumors, beyond gossip. The first who offered her respect and feeling. If he left now, she would lose much more than an employer. She would lose the only place where she had begun to feel alive. The next morning, something changed. His breathing was more stable, the fever lower. He was still weak, but he was responding. When he opened his eyes, Miriam seemed to have aged days, but the brightness in her eyes betrayed that something inside her was lighting up again. "You didn't sleep?" he asked with a hoarse voice. "No, while you were like this," she responded, holding his hand. He tried to smile. "Apparently. I still have a lot to live for." "You do," she responded softly. "And I want you to live." Jonas closed his eyes again, not from weakness, but from emotion. In that simple room, lit only by the sun entering through the cracks, there was a gentle silence. It was a silence of promise, of connection strengthened by pain, of a love that, even without being openly declared, already existed with force. The unexpected illness had revealed something profound. Miriam was willing to fight for his life. And Jonas, even fragile, was beginning to realize that he didn't want to live any more days without her presence. The fever broke completely on the 4th day. Jonas was finally able to sit up in bed, to take some broth that Miriam carefully prepared, to speak in full sentences without his voice failing. But he was still weak. His body had been through a tremendous ordeal, and recovery would take time. Miriam insisted he stay in bed for at least another week. "I can't lie here doing nothing while there's work to be done," Jonas protested. "The work will wait," Miriam said firmly. "You nearly died, Jonas. Do you understand that? Another day in that heat, another night with that fever, and I might have lost you." Her voice broke on the last words. Jonas reached out and took her hand. "But you didn't lose me. I'm here. Thanks to you. Thanks to stubbornness and cold compresses," she said, trying to lighten the mood. And maybe a little bit of prayer. More than a little bit. I think, Jonas said softly. I heard you, in my delirium. Heard you praying. Heard you begging me to stay. Miriam's cheeks flushed. I didn't know you could hear. I could. And it gave me something to hold on to. Something to fight for. They sat in silence for a moment, hands still clasped together. Miriam, Jonas finally said. While I was sick. I did something. Something I need to tell you about. She looked at him, concerned. What do you mean? Before the fever got really bad, when I first started feeling ill. I called for the village scribe. Had him come here in secret. Why? To make my will. Miriam's eyes widened. Your will. But Jonas. Let me finish, he said gently. I've lived many years alone, building this ranch, accumulating land and livestock and savings. And I realized, if I died, all of it would be scattered. Fought over. Maybe taken by people who never helped me with any of it. But what does this have to do with me? Everything, Jonas said. Because in that will. I left the ranch in your name. Miriam felt the blood drain from her face. In my name. But why? I'm not family. I'm not your wife. I'm just. You're not just anything, Jonas interrupted. You're the person who cared for this place. Who brought life back to it. Who sat by my bedside for days when you could have just let me die. You're the person who makes this ranch mean something again. But an entire ranch. Jonas, that's too much. I don't deserve. You deserve that and more, he said firmly. And I needed you to know. Needed you to understand that if something had happened to me, you wouldn't have been cast out again. You would have had a home. Security. A future. Tears spilled down Miriam's cheeks. You did this before you knew the truth about me. Before you knew the healer had lied. I did it because I trust you. Because I believe in who you are. Not because of what you can or can't do, but because of your character. Your heart. Miriam couldn't speak. The generosity of it, the faith he'd shown in her, it was overwhelming. I don't know what to say, she finally whispered. You don't have to say anything. Just know that you're not alone anymore. Whatever happens, you have a place here. Always. She leaned forward and embraced him, carefully, mindful of his weakness. Jonas wrapped his arms around her and held on tight. And in that embrace, something solidified between them. It wasn't just gratitude. It wasn't just affection. It was something deeper, stronger, more permanent. It was love. Real, true, unconditional love. The kind that endures through sickness and health, through hardship and joy, through every trial life could throw at it. They didn't say the words yet. But they both felt it. And that, for now, was enough. The healer's confession. Days passed, and Jonas finally began to regain his strength. The fever had receded, his breathing had returned to its normal rhythm, and although he was still weak, he could already sit up and talk calmly. Miriam remained by his side, attentive to every gesture, every change, as if she were guarding life itself. The bond between them had deepened in a way neither could explain. When Miriam entered the room, Jonas followed her with his eyes. And she, noticing his gaze, felt a strange warmth run through her chest. But while his body improved, her heart still carried an old pain. The pain of unjust fame, of words that still echoed, of memories that wouldn't erase. It was in this phase of fragility that something unexpected happened. One morning with an overcast sky, while Miriam changed the water in the basin beside Jonas's bed, a horse approached through the yard. It was a thin animal that seemed to have been forced to travel for long hours. One of the workers knocked on the door. Miriam, there's a man asking to speak with you. Says it's urgent. She felt a chill run down her spine. Who is it? The healer from the village. The name made the world stop for an instant. She let the cloth fall into the basin and stood motionless. Jonas noticed the change in her face. If you don't want to talk to him, I'll find a way to send him away, Jonas said firmly. No. I need to hear. The healer, an elderly man with an irregular beard and tired gaze, waited on the veranda. When he saw Miriam approach, he lowered his head as if carrying an ancient guilt. Miriam. I needed to come. I couldn't sleep until I spoke with you. She remained before him, tense, holding her hands together. What do you want? He breathed deeply, as if trying to create courage. I came to ask for forgiveness. The words fell like a stone on the veranda floor. Forgiveness? Miriam repeated, unbelieving. Yes, my child. I did something terrible, something I should never have done, and it's been on my conscience since the day it happened. She closed her expression. Speak. The healer passed his hand over his face, nervous. Your reputation, this reputation that has pursued you for years, it's not true. It never was. Miriam felt her legs weaken. What do you mean? You were never barren, he continued. I made up that story. Her heart beat strongly, irregularly. Why? The answer came like a blow. Your father asked me to. Miriam stepped back, her breathing short. My father asked you to lie. He asked, and insisted. Said he couldn't support you, that he needed to marry off your siblings, that he couldn't spend more on you. He thought that if you were seen as a burden, someone would eventually take you from the house. The rage rose like fire inside her. So all this, all the pain I lived, all the humiliation. She brought her hands to her mouth. It was built on a lie. The healer lowered his head. I have no justification. I accepted the request because I owe old favors to your father. I did it out of cowardice. I should have protected you, not destroyed your reputation. Miriam felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Suddenly, all the memories returned. The laughter in the street, the whispers in church, her father's contempt, the day she was sent to Jonas as if she were defective merchandise. Everything because someone invented a story to get rid of her. Miriam turned her face, trying to control the tears. The healer continued, I came because I know your life has taken a different course. I heard you now live on Colonel Whitmore's ranch and have found some peace. I don't want this lie to continue staining your future. My future, she repeated, lost. At that moment, Jonas appeared at the door, leaning on the doorframe, still weak but attentive. He had heard enough to understand. Is this true? Jonas asked, his voice low but firm. The healer confirmed with a slow nod. It is. She never had any problem. Jonas closed his eyes, breathing deeply, as if he needed to digest the injustice. Miriam, for her part, seemed to break right there. Years of pain collapsed on her all at once. I lost my family because of this. I lost my dignity. I lost my faith in myself. And all for a lie, she said, her voice trembling. The healer tried to approach, but Jonas stepped forward. You've said what you needed to. Now go. The healer nodded, crestfallen. I understand. I only ask for forgiveness, Miriam. One day. I hope you'll forgive me, even though I don't deserve it. He turned and left, leaving behind a heavy silence. Miriam fell to her knees on the veranda, finally letting the pain explode. She cried not just for what she suffered, but for everything she lost. Years of life, of self-esteem, of opportunity. Jonas ran to her, even weak, kneeling beside her. Miriam, look at me. I lived believing a lie, Jonas, she sobbed. My father, My father abandoned me because of something that never existed. Jonas held her face between his hands, carefully. It wasn't you who was wrong, it wasn't you who failed. Those who did this to you are the ones who need to carry that guilt for the rest of their lives. But everything they said about me is a lie, everything. And now you know that. Now you have the truth. She pressed her face against his chest, crying without fear. Jonas wrapped her in his arms, still weak but determined. I'm here, and I won't let you face this alone. In that embrace full of pain, something profound transformed. The weight she had carried since childhood began to dissolve. And the feeling between them, before timid, contained, silent, now became impossible to ignore. The healer's revelation didn't just bring truth. It brought liberation, brought fury, brought change. And above all, it opened the way for the greatest turning point in Miriam and Jonas's life. For 3 days after the healer's visit, Miriam moved through the ranch like a ghost. She performed her tasks mechanically, her mind clearly elsewhere. Jonas watched with concern, but he understood she needed time to process the magnitude of what she'd learned. Her entire identity, everything she'd believed about herself for years, had been built on a lie. That kind of revelation didn't just shake a person. It shattered them completely. On the third evening, Jonas found her sitting by the well, staring at nothing. He approached slowly, his strength mostly returned now. "May I sit with you?" She nodded without speaking. They sat in silence for several minutes, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Finally, Miriam spoke. "I keep thinking about all the years I wasted believing I was broken. All the times I apologized for existing. All the moments I made myself smaller, quieter, less, because I thought that's what I deserved." Her voice was hollow, defeated. And it was all for nothing. All those years of pain, for nothing. Jonas chose his words carefully. Not for nothing. She turned to him, anger flashing in her eyes for the first time. "How can you say that? Everything I suffered, everything I endured, it was based on a lie." "Yes," Jonas agreed. "And that's a terrible injustice. But those years, they made you who you are. They gave you compassion and strength and resilience that most people will never have. That suffering, as wrong as it was, it shaped you into someone extraordinary." "I don't feel extraordinary," Miriam whispered. "I feel like a fool." "You're not a fool. You were a victim. There's a difference." Miriam was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know how to be angry and grateful at the same time," she finally said. "I'm so furious at my father, at the healer, at everyone who participated in this lie. But I'm also—" She paused, struggling with the words. "I'm also grateful. Because if it hadn't happened, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have met you." Jonas felt his heart squeeze. "Miriam. I know it's twisted," she continued. "I know I shouldn't be thankful for the thing that hurt me most. But if my father hadn't sent me away, if the lie had never been told, I'd still be in that village. Still living that half-life. Still believing I had no value." She turned to face him fully. "But here, with you, I've learned I do have value. Not because I can do anything, but because I'm me. Because you see me, really see me, in a way no one ever has." Jonas reached out and took her hand. "I see you," he confirmed. "And what I see is someone worth everything." Miriam's eyes filled with tears again. But this time they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of release, of acceptance, of finally beginning to believe she might actually deserve the happiness that was being offered to her. "What do I do now?" she asked. "How do I move forward knowing the truth?" "One day at a time," Jonas said. "And not alone. Never alone again." She squeezed his hand. "Promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll never lie to me. Not even to protect me. Not even if you think it's for my own good. I've had enough of lies to last a lifetime. I promise, Jonas said solemnly. Nothing but truth between us. Always. Miriam nodded, and for the first time in days, she felt something like peace settle over her. The truth was painful. But it was also freeing. And with Jonas beside her, she was finally beginning to believe she could build a new life on that truth. A life not defined by what others said about her, but by what she chose for herself. Chapter 9, The Father's Reckoning. The days following the healer's visit were ones of heavy silence and deep thought. Miriam lived a mixture of liberation and collapse. On one hand, she felt relief knowing her body had never been defective. On the other, the resentment toward her father seemed even deeper. He hadn't just allowed his daughter to suffer. He had planted the root of the suffering himself. One gray morning, Jonas found her in the kitchen, standing still with a plate in her hands, staring at nothing. "You haven't eaten anything today," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "I'm not hungry." "You've been like this since early morning. Do you want to tell me what's going through your mind?" She sighed, slowly setting the plate on the table. "I know the village is already talking about my father. It hurts. Even after everything, it hurts to imagine his name being dragged through the mud." Jonas approached. "Miriam, he didn't think twice before dragging yours. What's coming back to him now is consequence." "I know, but he's still my father." Jonas looked at her with tenderness and firmness at the same time. "You have too big a heart. Maybe even too big for someone who didn't know how to care for it." Before she could respond, they heard hurried footsteps outside. One of the ranch hands appeared at the door. "Boss, sorry to interrupt, but Thomas Hartwell is out front. Says he needs to speak with the girl." Miriam went pale. Jonas felt his body stiffen. "He came all the way here." "He did. He's out there, near the fence. Said he won't enter without being authorized." Miriam swallowed hard. "I need to see him." Jonas looked at her seriously. "Are you sure? You don't have to force yourself. I've been silent for years. Now I want to hear what he has to say." The two walked toward the yard. Thomas stood there, more aged than Miriam remembered. His beard poorly shaved, his worn hat in his hands, his eyes downcast. He wasn't the same hard and haughty man who had once sent her away. When he saw his daughter approaching, he breathed deeply. "Miriam." She stopped a few steps away, not embracing him, not advancing, not fleeing. Jonas stayed slightly to her side, like a silent shield. "Why are you here?" Miriam asked, her voice firm despite her chest trembling. Thomas squeezed the hat between his fingers. "I heard the healer came, that he told everything. And I imagined you already know I requested that lie." "I know," she confirmed without looking away. "I know you condemned me to a life of shame for convenience." He swallowed hard. "At that time, I had many mouths to feed, little land, little money. I thought it would be better if someone took you away. And nobody takes a daughter who seems valuable, but a daughter who becomes a burden, someone always appears. So you decided to turn me into a burden. I was weak, a coward. I thought more about my peace than your dignity. That's the truth." The silence that followed was heavy. Jonas kept his gaze hard, but respected the space between father and daughter. Miriam took a step forward. "Do you have any idea what I went through? The humiliations, the laughter in the street, the looks at the market. I was treated as a defective woman, as if I were less than others. And while that happened, you slept peacefully." "I never slept peacefully," Thomas murmured. "I always knew I'd done wrong. But when I saw you were working here, that you hadn't died of hunger or fallen into the world, I convinced myself that somehow it had worked out." She shook her head, disappointed. "No, it didn't work out. You abandoned me while I was alive. I was left alone. If God hadn't placed this man," she pointed to Jonas, "in my path, maybe I never would have discovered who I really am." Thomas raised his eyes slightly, facing Jonas for an instant. "I know you're an honorable man, Jonas. The whole village knows. That's why I thought, at least here, she'd have a chance to start over." Jonas responded with severe calm. "Starting over isn't built on lies. But since you're here, say what you came to say." Thomas breathed deeply, seeming to search for words he'd never learned to say. "I came to ask for forgiveness," he finally said, looking at Miriam. "I can't go back in time. I can't erase what I did. But if there's still a thread of space in your heart, I ask for forgiveness. Not as a father who thinks he deserves it, but as the man who made a terrible mistake." Miriam closed her eyes for an instant, feeling a tear fall. When she opened them, the expression wasn't of hatred, but of pain. "Forgiveness isn't something demanded, Father. And it's not bought. I heard what I needed to hear. But I was the one who carried the consequences, not you." He nodded, defeated. "I know. And I know you may never be able to forgive me completely. But I didn't want to leave this world without at least looking in your eyes and saying, I was wrong. I failed as a father." A colder wind passed through the yard. Jonas felt Miriam tremble, but she remained standing. "You sent me here, thought you were getting rid of a problem," she continued. "But without meaning to, you gave me something you don't deserve as a gift. A place where I'm respected. A man who saw me beyond the lie you allowed to be placed on me." Thomas looked at Jonas again. "I'm grateful you took in my daughter when I cast her out," he said, his voice choked. Jonas responded without looking away. "She wasn't cast out. Here she was received. And if today she holds her head high, it's by her own merit. I only did the minimum." Miriam breathed deeply. Her heart was divided between resentment and a feeling she didn't want to feed, but that insisted on emerging. Compassion. "Father. I can't forget what you did. I can't pretend it didn't hurt. And it may be that I never can call you father with lightness again. But I don't want to carry hatred inside me. That would destroy me more than I've already been destroyed." He raised his head, surprised. "So, you forgive me?" "I'm starting to try," she responded. "Forgiving isn't approving. It's not forgetting. It's deciding not to let your evil own my life. You no longer command what I feel, or who I am. I'm not the sterile daughter, the disposable daughter. I'm Miriam. And now I have my own destiny." Thomas's eyes filled with tears. Something few would have imagined seeing in that man. "You became more of a woman than I ever imagined. And I'm proud of that, even knowing I did nothing to help." Miriam breathed firmly. "If you want to change someday, start by telling the truth in the village. Tell everyone you lied. Not for me, but for all the other women who might still be being judged unjustly." He nodded. "I'll do that. If that's the only right thing I do for the rest of my life, it'll be worth it." Thomas put his hat back on, gave one last look at his daughter, and turned to leave. Before he moved away completely, Jonas called out, "Mr. Hartwell." The man stopped and faced him. "If you want to see your daughter again someday, come with respect. Here she's not a burden. Here she owns her own name." Thomas simply nodded briefly, and continued down the dirt road, diminished, but for the first time conscious of the size of the damage he'd caused. When he disappeared on the horizon, Miriam finally let her shoulders fall. Jonas approached and lightly touched her arm. "You were stronger than anyone could have been." She turned her face to him, eyes full of tears. "I thought I'd collapse, but when I spoke, it felt like I was removing stones from my back." "You are removing them," he responded. Miriam then did something she'd never done on her own initiative. She took a step toward Jonas and embraced him. Not a timid embrace of distant gratitude, but a complete embrace from someone who finally finds a safe harbor after crossing a stormy sea. He wrapped her firmly, feeling her body tremble. And there, in the middle of the yard, with the wind raising dust and the past still echoing, something solidified. They were no longer just landlord and sheltered girl. They were two survivors, two hearts marked by pain, but who together were beginning to write a new meaning for what family was, for what destiny was, for what love was. The village would still talk a lot. Her name would still echo. But from that day forward, not as the sterile daughter sent as a joke, but as the woman who had the courage to face her own past head-on. And to choose, with a wounded heart, to move forward with her head held high. And deep down, without anyone there knowing, what was about to be born between Miriam and Jonas would be even stronger than any blood family. A mature love, built in the midst of pain, and destined to surprise everyone at the end of this story. The days after the confrontation with her father brought Miriam a strange sense of lightness. The weight hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had shifted somehow. Become more manageable. She found herself smiling more easily, laughing at small things, allowing herself moments of genuine happiness without the constant shadow of shame following her. Jonas noticed the change, and it made his own heart lighter in turn. One afternoon, as they worked together in the garden, Miriam suddenly straightened and wiped her brow. Jonas? Thank you. He looked up from where he was pulling weeds. For what? For everything. For taking me in when I had nowhere to go. For defending me when others mocked. For seeing past the lies to who I really am. For. She paused, her voice growing softer. For making me believe I was worth something. Jonas stood, brushing dirt from his hands. Miriam, you always were worth something. I just helped you see it. She smiled, and it transformed her entire face. Either way, thank you. They stood there, garden tools forgotten, just looking at each other in the afternoon sun. And in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. A recognition. An acknowledgement. A truth that neither was quite ready to voice, but both understood completely. They had become essential to each other. Not just convenient. Not just comfortable. But necessary. Like breathing. Like heartbeat. Like life itself. And though the words remained unspoken, the feeling was there. Growing stronger with each passing day. Putting down roots so deep that nothing could tear them loose. They were building something together. Something real. Something lasting. Something that would soon need to be named. But for now, this was enough. This quiet understanding. This gentle certainty. This knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it together. The proposal. After the painful meeting with her father, something definitively changed inside Miriam. The resentment still existed, of course. The wound wouldn't heal overnight. But the feeling of being a discarded object had been broken. Now she knew the truth, knew she wasn't defective, knew she wasn't a burden. And above all, she knew she was no longer alone. The days on the ranch gained a new tone. Miriam seemed to walk with firmer steps. Jonas watched this with eyes full of pride. He saw someone who had crossed a desert of humiliation, and still managed to smile, care, love. One clear afternoon, with an open sky and gentle wind. Jonas called Miriam to go to the orchard. I want to see how the orange trees are doing, he said, picking up his hat. They're loaded. I think this year the harvest will be good, she responded, already accustomed to the routine. They walked side by side. The silence between them was no longer strange, it was comfortable. Occasionally their hands almost touched, until, without realizing, they actually touched. Neither pulled away. When they reached the orchard, Jonas stopped near an older tree, the one he always said his mother liked to sit under in the shade. The smell of ripe fruit mixed with that of the warm earth. "Miriam," he began, his voice more serious than usual. "There are things I still haven't said the right way." She looked at him, attentive. "About what?" "About us." Her heart raced. "Jonas," she whispered, already sensing where this might lead. He breathed deeply. "When you arrived here, I just wanted to give you a roof. Then I realized you were giving much more to this place than you were receiving. You brought life to the house, to the days, to me." Miriam lowered her eyes, moved. "I just tried to be useful." "You were far beyond useful. You were healing." The silence around became denser. Even the birds seemed to listen. "I lived many years alone, Miriam," he continued. "And over time, I convinced myself it was better that way. Less risk, less pain. But then you appeared, wounded, marked, not knowing who you were. And somehow, while trying to find yourself, you ended up finding me too." She raised her gaze, and there were tears forming. "Jonas. I'm afraid to believe in happiness. Whenever I thought something good would happen, life found a way to pull the ground out from under me." He approached a bit more. "I can't promise life will be easy. Nor can I promise there won't be problems. But I can promise one thing, you'll never carry the weight alone again. Neither the weight of pain, nor the weight of joy." Miriam breathed deeply, trying to keep her voice steady. "What do you want from me? Truly." He didn't look away. "I want you by my side. Not just as someone from the household. Not just as a friend. I want you as my wife. I want you to walk with me, not out of gratitude, but by choice." The words hung in the air. Miriam felt her legs tremble. It was as if her entire history, all her pain, had brought her to this exact moment. "I don't know how to be anyone's wife, Jonas. I never learned to be anything. I only learned to survive." "Then we'll learn together," he responded. "I also don't know how to be a husband. I only know how to be honest, how to work, how to care. And I know what I feel." "And what do you feel?" she asked, though deep down she already knew. Jonas took another step. Now they were so close he could smell her hair, feel the tremor of her breathing. "I feel love for you, Miriam. It's not pity, it's not obligation, it's not charity. It's love. Love for this courageous woman who was beaten down by life and still didn't lose the capacity to be gentle." The first tears escaped from her eyes. "Love, for me. For you," he repeated without hesitation. Miriam brought her hand to her mouth, as if wanting to hold back a sob. "I don't know if I deserve this." "You deserve more than this," he corrected. "But for now, I can only offer what I am and what I have. My heart, my lands, my name." She breathed deeply, feeling it hurt with emotion. "Do you really think someone will accept this? The village, my father, what will they say?" "They'll say many things, they always have," Jonas responded. "But for the first time, we're the ones who'll choose what to live. Not them. I've already lived too long imprisoned by what others think. I don't want that for us." A stronger wind shook the leaves of the trees. A deep silence took hold for a few seconds, until Miriam let escape what she'd been holding for so long. "I also feel something for you, Jonas. I've felt it for some time, but I was afraid to confess, even to myself. I think, maybe the day you defended me at the festival, or maybe the day you got sick and I saw my world collapse at the possibility of losing you. I just know that when I think about the future, I can't imagine myself anywhere but here. And I can't imagine myself beside any other man but you." Jonas's eyes shone. "Then tell me, will you accept walking with me, however it works out, with whatever life allows, but hand in hand, without hiding who we are?" Miriam swallowed hard, feeling her heart explode in her chest. I accept. It was simple, without ceremony, without witnesses beyond the trees, the wind, and God. But in that, I accept, there was more truth than in many weddings full of guests. Jonas approached even more, and carefully, as if afraid to break something precious, he passed his hand over her face, wiping away a tear that fell. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Even so." She held his hand. "For the first time in my life. I'm sure of something." Then, finally, he pulled her into an embrace that was no longer just comfort. It was surrender. Miriam rested her face on his chest and felt, up close, Jonas's heart beating fast, as human as hers. Then he pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. And without hurry, without fear, he kissed her. A kiss without urgency, but full of everything they couldn't say for so long. It wasn't a love born from a beautiful story. It was a love born in the midst of pain, injustice, shame, illness, renunciation. A love built on honesty, protection, complicity. Later, that same day, Jonas made a decision that surprised the entire village. The following Sunday, he went to the church in Willowbrook with Miriam by his side, head held high. People whispered, curious. Her father was in the back, ashamed. After the service, with everyone still gathered in front of the church, Jonas raised his voice. "I want to say something before all of you." The murmuring ceased. For years, many people in this village pointed fingers at Miriam. Called her sterile, a burden, a woman without value. Today everyone knows that was a lie. But I want to go beyond that. I want you to know that I choose this woman as my companion. Not for lack of options, not out of pity, not out of obligation. I choose her because I love her. Those present looked at each other, astonished. Miriam felt her face burn, but she didn't lower her head. On the contrary, she straightened her posture, like someone who finally recognizes herself as whole. Jonas continued, "Whoever wants to respect us, will be welcome in my home. Whoever doesn't want to, stay away. Because from today on, any word against her will be a word against me." No one responded. There were those who approved in silence. There were those who turned up their noses. But one thing was certain, no one would have the courage to confront Colonel Jonas Whitmore on that decision. Thomas Hartwell himself, with teary eyes, watched from afar. He knew he'd lost the right to have an opinion. Miriam looked at Jonas, her chest full of emotion. Never, in her entire life, had anyone chosen her with such clarity, with such courage, with such voice. There, before everyone, her destiny was tied not to shame anymore, but to love. And it was thus that their love was fully born. Not in calm, but in the middle of the storm. There was still much ahead. Life on the ranch, the changes, the future that awaited them. And what no one imagined, is that fate still held one last surprise. A twist that would seal this story in a way no one in Willowbrook would ever forget. The declaration Jonas made before the entire village was a watershed. From there, Miriam stopped being seen as a shadow, gossip, or joke. Now she had a name, respect. And above all, she had someone who chose her truly. But life, always full of ironies and twists, still held one last surprise. One that would change their story definitively. I think so. It must just be tiredness. Jonas held her by the shoulders. Rest a bit. You're pale. She didn't argue. And inside, a huge doubt consumed her. A doubt she always believed she could never experience. Days later, hidden in the room, Miriam called one of the older women from the neighborhood. Mrs. Adeline, known for helping expectant mothers and understanding the female body better than any healer in the village. Mrs. Adeline examined her carefully, asked questions, observed signs. And then she opened a slow smile, full of certainty. "My child, you're expecting a baby." Miriam felt the ground disappear. A baby? Yes. A healthy baby. You're pregnant. Miriam brought her hands to her face and began to cry. Cry as she'd never cried. Not from pain, not from shame, but from liberation, from victory, from the justice of destiny. But I thought I couldn't. Someone lied to you, child. Your body never had any problem. You're living what was always rightfully yours. Her heart beat so strongly it seemed to echo through the entire ranch. That afternoon, when Jonas arrived, he found Miriam standing at the kitchen door, eyes shining with emotion. He noticed immediately that something profound had happened. Miriam, are you well? She breathed deeply, held his hand, and placed it on her own belly. Jonas, we're going to be parents. For an instant. Jonas stood motionless, as if the world had stopped. Then his eyes filled with tears, something rare in that strong man. And he pulled her to his chest, embracing her with an intensity that said more than 1,000 words. Miriam, this is the greatest gift life could give me. She cried on his shoulder. And Jonas, moved, ran his hand through her hair. You deserve this. You deserve everything. You deserve love, you deserve future, you deserve family. And I promise I'll be the best father I can be. When the news spread through the village, many were left speechless. Others, ashamed. Some even asked forgiveness for past insults. But the greatest truth was clear. The woman the entire village pointed to as sterile, was pregnant. It was life itself responding to the lies. Not with vengeance, but with miracle. Years later, when their son, a strong boy with calm eyes like his mother's, ran through the yard, people said that the story of Miriam and Jonas was one of the greatest lessons ever lived in Willowbrook. The lesson that no cruel word defines anyone's destiny. The lesson that true love is born, grows, and flourishes even on wounded ground. The lesson that truth always finds its way. And when it arrives, nothing remains the same. And thus, the girl who was sent as a joke, became wife, companion, mother, and owner of her own story. And the solitary colonel discovered that life's greatest wealth wasn't in the field, nor in inheritance, nor in work. But in the love that entered his house the day destiny decided to change everything. This story ends with a strong embrace, a future full of hope, and a reminder for all of us. Judging is easy. Loving and believing is what transforms lives. Epilogue. 5 years passed like a gentle stream, steady and sure. The ranch flourished under the care of Jonas and Miriam. Their son, whom they named Samuel, grew strong and healthy, with his mother's gentle spirit and his father's quiet strength. But he wasn't their only child. 2 years after Samuel came Rebekah, fierce and bright-eyed. And then, unexpectedly, came the twins. Jacob and Grace. 4 children. 4 beautiful, healthy, laughing children. Each one a living testimony to the lies that had nearly destroyed their mother. The village of Willowbrook changed too. Thomas Hartwell, true to his word, had confessed his lie publicly. He spent his remaining years trying to make amends, though he and Miriam never fully recovered their relationship. Some wounds, even when forgiven, leave scars. The healer left the village shortly after his confession, unable to bear the weight of what he'd done. No one knew where he went. And frankly, no one much cared. The ranch became known throughout the region, not for its size or productivity, though both were impressive. But for the love that seemed to emanate from every corner of it. People said you could feel it the moment you arrived. Something in the air, something in the way Jonas and Miriam looked at each other, something in the laughter of their children. It was the kind of place that made you believe in second chances. In redemption. In the possibility that even the deepest pain could transform into something beautiful. On warm evenings, after the children were in bed, Jonas and Miriam would sit on the porch, just as they had years before. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped together. One such evening. Miriam turned to Jonas with a thoughtful expression. Do you ever think about how different things could have been? How do you mean? If the healer had never lied. If my father had never sent me away. If you had never agreed to take me in. Jonas considered this carefully. I think about it sometimes, he admitted. But I don't dwell on it. Because all those terrible things, they led us here. To this. To our family. And I wouldn't change that for anything. Miriam smiled, that full, genuine smile that still took his breath away. Neither would I, she said softly. Isn't that strange? To be grateful for the thing that hurt you most? Not strange, Jonas replied. Human. We're complicated creatures, capable of holding pain and joy in the same hand. Of finding blessing in the midst of curse. They sat in silence for a while longer, watching the stars emerge one by one. Jonas? Thank you for seeing me. Really seeing me. When everyone else looked right through me, or saw only what they expected to see, you saw the truth. You saw me. Jonas squeezed her hand. Thank you for letting me. For trusting me with your heart when you had every reason not to trust anyone. From inside the house came a child's cry. Samuel having a nightmare perhaps. Miriam started to rise, but Jonas stopped her. I'll go, he said. You rest. She watched him disappear into the house, this man who had become her everything. Her protector, her partner, her love. And she thought about how far she'd come from that terrified girl who'd arrived in a wagon, believing herself worthless. She thought about all the women who might still be out there, believing the lies others told about them. Believing they were less than. Broken. Unwanted. Unlovable. And she hoped, prayed really, that each of them would find their own Jonas. Someone who could see past the lies to the truth underneath. Someone who could love them not despite their scars, but with full knowledge of them. Someone who could help them rewrite their story. Because everyone deserves that chance. Everyone deserves to be seen. To be valued. To be loved. No exceptions. Jonas returned. Samuel settled and sleeping again. He sat back down beside Miriam and pulled her close. She rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing. Tell me something, she murmured. What? Tell me you'll never get tired of me. That even when I'm old and gray, you'll still see me the way you do now. Jonas pressed a kiss to the top of her head. Miriam. I'll see you the same way when we're both ancient and can barely walk. When our grandchildren are running through this yard. When every line on your face tells a story I already know by heart. I'll see you exactly the same. Because what I see, it has nothing to do with time or age or circumstance. What is it then? I see your soul, he said simply. And that never changes. Miriam felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears. Happy tears. The kind that come when you realize you're exactly where you're supposed to be. With exactly who you're supposed to be with. Living exactly the life you were always meant to live. Even if the path to get there was harder than anyone should have to walk. I love you, she whispered. I love you too, Jonas replied. Always have. Always will. And there, on that porch, under those stars, surrounded by the life they'd built together, two wounded souls found complete healing. Not because the wounds disappeared. But because they'd learned to tend them together. Because they'd discovered that love, real love, doesn't erase pain. It simply makes it bearable. It gives it meaning. It transforms it into something that, while never quite beautiful, is at least purposeful. And sometimes, that's the greatest miracle of all. Not the erasing of suffering. But the redemption of it. The using of it to build something stronger, truer, more lasting than anything that came before. That was their story. The sterile daughter who wasn't sterile at all. And the solitary colonel who discovered that solitude was just another lie. A story of pain, yes. But more than that, a story of hope. Of healing. Of love that conquers all. Even when all seems insurmountable. Especially then. And if you take nothing else from this tale, take this. You are not the lies others tell about you. You are not the labels they place on you. You are not the limitations they try to impose. You are, simply and beautifully, you. And that is more than enough. It always has been. It always will be. Never forget that. Never. The end. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the next stories. And leave a like if you enjoyed it. Thank you very much.